Hello, America, and welcome to the second episode of the American Restraint podcast. Happy Easter week, if you celebrate that. I'm your host, Patrick Trepanier, and I'm excited to continue on this journey. Okay, before we get going, just a little recap for those of you who are new to the show. This is a podcast about how to fix America. It is largely based on my recent book, American Restraint, Taming Hyper-Individualism and Hyper-Capitalism. I believe the country is fundamentally divided and that the forces of hyper-capitalism and hyper-individualism are largely to blame. I also believe in the power of federalism and shifting what DC can't do to individual states which can do. All right, let's go. The title of this episode is America, I Don't Recognize You Anymore. Okay, to set the stage for this episode, I want to talk a little bit about not recognizing the place you were born. For me, that lovely place I was born was in San Diego, California. Growing up in Southern California during the 1970s and 80s was paradise. Awesome weather, chill, friendly people, a patriotic vibe, and most importantly, it was a place where a middle-class family could thrive. I grew up in amazing San Diego, went to college in LA, go Dodgers, and then our family moved around a bit before settling back down in San Diego right before the Great Recession of 2008. While the weather in San Diego was still idyllic, over the first few years of moving back to Cali, I realized that my city was gone. Okay, another quick aside. I love 80s music, and I think it really helps to set the stage on this story by highlighting a great song by the Pretenders from 1984, My City Was Gone. I was stunned and amazed. My childhood memories slowly swirled past like the wind through the trees. I went back to Ohio, but my pretty countryside had been paved down the middle by a government that had no pride. I love that last line, by a government that had no pride. I highly recommend listening to that song by the Pretenders. By the way, this could be the theme song from J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy, if you like that book or movie. Okay, back to San Diego. The city I grew up in had completely changed over just a couple of decades. The weather was still awesome, but the vibe was no longer chill, relaxed, or even patriotic. The city had changed dramatically. The state of California had changed dramatically into one that was much more bureaucratic and a progressive paradise. In the words of Chrissie Hynde from the Pretenders, my city and state were changed by a government that had no pride. Fast forward to the summer of COVID in 2020. California became lockdown central, where government bureaucrats seemed to take pleasure in shutting down everyone and everything, including churches, just on a whim. During that summer, my family took a road trip to partially get away from the lockdown environment of my city and state that had gone permanently. As we drove through the states of Utah and Wyoming to visit national parks, it was like we were driving into another country with vastly different policies regarding COVID. I saw firsthand on this trip that America wasn't one country anymore. You see, America hasn't really been one country for decades. Culturally, politically, and generationally, the country has been separating for the latter part of the 20th century. 85% of Americans believe the country is deeply divided. If you just look at the major issues dividing our country, you can see that we no longer share a common cultural fabric. While there have always been unique challenges that have faced America, it seems that for most of our history, we have exemplified the spirit of e pluribus unum. Nowadays, there seems to be an emphasis on unum and not on pluribus. We've had the Civil War, Depression, civil rights, and other major struggles that have tested our country's unity, and patriotism. We used to be the great melting pot, but now it seems like we're just melting. For example, a large percentage of Americans now believe in open borders. The idea that anyone from any country should be able to cross our borders and immediately take advantage of all government benefits. Those who oppose this concept of unlimited immigration believe that a nation cannot exist unless it has borders, and that we should only let in immigrants to this country as long as they are willing to assimilate into American culture. The open borders crowd believes anyone who opposes their position is a racist and a bigot. The controlled immigration crowd believes that anyone who opposes their position hates America and the rule of law. You see, these are mostly the sound bites that you'll hear about immigration on cable news or social media. The real reason that the immigration issue has not been solved is because both Democrat and Republican elites like the current immigration policy chaos. Democrats want mostly Latino immigrants to come to America and vote Democrat. Republican business owners love Latino immigrants because they'll work their fields, clean hotels, and mow their lawns for below-market wages. Both Democrats and Republicans use convenient pro- or anti-immigration soundbites during their campaigns. All the while, unskilled Latino immigrants barely survive in poor living conditions, and unskilled American citizens lose out on blue-collar jobs that Latino immigrants will do for much less. You see, things haven't changed that much since Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Quick aside, this is probably my favorite book of all time. I highly, highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. The movie's great too. Another issue that bitterly divides Americans is abortion. Since Roe v. Wade in the 70s made abortion legal throughout the land, this has been an issue that refuses reconciliation. Roughly half of America identifies as pro-choice, while the other half identifies as pro-life. In the past 50 years, neither side has given up much ground on the issue. The pro-legal abortion side has tried to market their position as a women's health issue. The anti-legal abortion side has tried to market their position as protecting the rights of the unborn. And while science has decreased the number of weeks a fetus is viable outside the womb, the pro-choice side has pushed the envelope further, demanding the right to abort a fetus in the third trimester, and that position should be non-negotiable. These are just a couple of the major issues that divide America and our leaders. And there are many other contentious issues that I see no hope for compromise in our broken country today. Because Americans are so bitterly divided, these and other issues will continue to be the sources of gridlock and animosity. As the country has grown and become more divided, it has also become increasingly unmanageable. It's not just that we don't have leaders today who can help solve these major problems and bring Americans together again. These issues aren't solvable, given how big, corrupt, and divided we are. Part of the reason that these major issues aren't solvable is because we have lost faith in the institutions that used to help us overcome these major contentious issues. Family breakup and divorce have weakened the institution of family. Politicians, government, and business leaders go from one level of incompetence and scandal to the next. And trust in these institutions has gone to their lowest levels in 50 years. Americans even trust each other less than they used to. In the late 70s, nearly 70% of Americans agreed that most people can be trusted. That number fell to almost 40% in the latest survey. That drop cannot be overstated. Cultural observer David Brooks wrote an excellent article in The Atlantic in late 2020 entitled, "Collapsing Levels of Trust Are Devastating America." Highly recommend this article. He had a quote I can't forget. Trust is the glue that holds society together. Yet we no longer trust our government, our institutions, or each other very much anymore. As we continue to ask the question on this podcast of how to fix America, it leads right into the question of, when did America start to become undone? Many would agree that at some point in the 1960s, the American adult decided that their happiness was more important than the happiness of their children. From the early days of America, parents in the land of opportunity always put the needs of their children first. The Cultural Revolution of the 60s gave adults an excuse to embrace narcissism and immediate gratification. More about this in the next episode. But what about my needs? So, a couple of specific examples of how America started to become undone in the 60s. While the civil rights and peace movements of the 60s were good examples of individuals coming together to create a stronger America, the rest of the 60s created a celebration of unrestrained individualism that has continued to this day. For example, the sexual revolution also gave adults the excuse to prioritize sexual freedom rather than try to understand what societal benefits could be had by keeping the sacredness of sex within marriage. As spouses began to give up on each other, society as a whole started to question the value of families. The best place for children to grow and thrive is within a home with a mother and father who love each other and work hard on behalf of their children. What the 60s did was to claim that a small percentage of dysfunctional families represented the entire family structure. The strong foundation of families was replaced with a shaky philosophy of unrestrained individual freedom and self-exploration that ultimately led to the loneliness epidemic of today. A couple other examples of how the 60s radically made America become undone was the normalization of drugs, which have ravaged society from pot to coke to meth to fentanyl. Another example is the war on organized religion. While it's undeniable there have been some corrupt leaders who have made a bad name for organized religion. Religion went from being a source of stability for communities, families, and individuals to a source of scorn, ridicule, and contempt by popular entertainers and academics. Organized religion has provided moral strength and courage throughout our nation's history, from Washington in the Revolutionary War to Lincoln in the Civil War to MLK in the Civil Rights Movement. The 1960s kicked God out of schools, and now God is hard to find in contemporary society. Individuals are more lonely and depressed than ever. Families are more broken than ever, and communities aren't really communities anymore. Belief in God used to give us hope, strength, and perspective. Atheism and agnosticism have just given us the religions of materialism and consumerism instead. The last impact of the 60s counterculture that I'll mention here came from a revolution in economics. When Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged in 1957, most Americans paid little attention. However, over the course of the 60s and 70s, a growing number of Republican Party leaders and influential economists began to redefine capitalism using libertarian ideas. Just as radical individualism was encouraged in the 60s, radical capitalism became the rallying cry of economists like Hayek and Friedman. Their essential advice to business leaders was, make as much money as possible. There are no limits. That is your duty as a capitalist. You don't have any obligations to your employees, your customers, or the environment. Your only obligation is to your shareholders. Do whatever it takes to build wealth, even if you break various norms and regulations. As libertarian economists infected the Republican Party, America became overrun with financial and business disasters until today. From unethical corporate raiders of the 1980s to Enron and corrupt Wall Street bankers during the dot-com and subprime crashes of the 2000s, most corporate leaders today don't care about American individuals, American families, or American communities. Partly in response to these major shifts in American culture, one major trend has appeared. For the past 20 years, through both Republican and Democratic presidencies, approximately 80% of Americans across the board have been saying that America is on the wrong track. This just isn't a one-time survey. This is consistent because of the divisiveness, brokenness, and corruption in our country affecting everyone. It's almost like everyone is listening to that song by the Pretenders. My city was gone. And as hyper-individualism and hyper-capitalism have helped make America undone, average Americans overwhelmingly believe that something's seriously wrong with America. And when 80% of Americans consistently say over 20 years that America's on the wrong track, I also think that they're saying they don't see any real solutions to America's broken state. While most Americans don't know what to do about the future of our country, large numbers of voters have simply given up voting. And why should they, when there is such a disconnect between our leaders and our citizens in the issues of our time? I've mentioned this stat in previous episodes, but it's really astounding. Roughly 90 million eligible voters didn't vote in either 2016 or 2024, and 100 million didn't vote in the 2020 presidential elections. These are actually higher than almost every candidate's votes in the past 3 elections. Do elected leaders really have the consent of the governed? In one alarming trend over the past decade or so, separatists from states as diverse as California, Texas, Washington, and Illinois have already started secession movements. And the past decade has brought more breakup fever, with rural Virginians petitioning to become part of West Virginia, and rural Oregonians proposing to join with Idaho and parts of Northern California to form a greater Idaho. Why are these people giving up on America? I believe it is because more and more people realize that America is too big, too corrupt, too divided, and too angry to keep going on with the status quo. Am I being overly pessimistic or just realistic about the current state of America? While I still believe that there are many good people and many good things about America, many Americans realize that America has lost the ability to govern itself. Just look at the chaos in the presidency, Congress, and Supreme Court, not to mention our recent failed trillion-dollar military escapades in the Middle East. All of the recent challenges facing our country are not just due to an uptick in divisiveness or a loss of trust. There is a structural reason why America has come undone. More about this structural reason in the next episode. Okay, see you later this week. And don't forget to check out the book, like, subscribe, review American Restraint on Amazon and other outlets. Have a great day, America.